Hello everyone! Here's what else I saw in June that I didn't already tell you about. Movie number 1 is 2000's The Patriot, the Revolutionary War epic, that's the American Revolution, in which Mel Gibson plays a French and Indian War veteran who'd rather sit out this conflict with England, but he's forced to get involved when a British officer personally attacks his family. This is an excellent film, long, but I don't see how it couldn't have been with so much story to tell. As it is, it has to jump forward a few times to cover the entire war. I completely forgot this was directed by Roland Emmerich, who is associated more with bombastic sci-fi disaster movies. It's surprising, therefore, to see him exercise so much restraint in a dramatic, serious film grounded in historical reality. Not that there aren't some bombastic moments, too. There are several big fight scenes and battles, but they demonstrate the senselessness of this kind of warfare. The film doesn't cut corners when it comes to brutality and bloodshed. Lots of squibs from musket fire, stabbing from bayonets, that one shot where a guy's head is knocked clean off by a cannonball. But the baseline is a deeply personal story built around family relationships. And the main conflict is not the Americans versus the British, or Washington's generals versus Cornwallis, but rather a father and son seeking justice against a diabolical British dragoon, played by Jason Isaacs, who is just fantastically evil here. He's great, making the most of every scene he's in. The whole cast is good. Gibson sells it, of course. Heath Ledger as his eldest son is charming and grows up over the course of the film. Tom Wilkinson makes General Cornwallis an enjoyable character. Chris Cooper plays a tired American leader. Jolie Richardson is Gibson's dead wife's sister who has a thing for her brother-in-law. Adam Baldwin appears as a loyalist who questions his choices, and the child actors are great too, especially Skye McCole Bartusiak. Even minor characters leave a significant impression, helping make this an engaging, thought-provoking, humorous, powerful, moving film. The only kind of messy thing about it is that as lengthy and as thorough as it is within its geographical area, it felt like the ending was rushed. It's as if the movie was saying, "Oh man, we gotta wrap this up. Okay, here's Yorktown, and it's over. Roll credits." I don't know what they should have done instead, though. Movie number 2 is an obscure TV movie from 1975 titled The Runaway Barge. We found this movie on YouTube and watched it in honor of Bo Hopkins, one of my mom's favorite actors who just passed away. Somehow, while collecting his movies, she never came across this one, even though it's also got Tim Matheson in it, who she also likes, so this was kind of a twofer. Bo Hopkins is the star here, a likable, albeit kind of wild riverman. Hopkins has a thick drawl that takes some getting used to if you want to understand his dialogue, but he's got a rascally charm. Young Tim Matheson, with glorious hair and a boyish sweetness, plays a fish out of water, no pun intended, city slicker who's just taken a job on a barge on the Mississippi River. What develops is a pretty simple plot, with bad guys doing bad things, a young Nick Nolte making up one of the gang. I wasn't entirely sure what exactly the bad guys were up to, hijacking, bootlegging, but while there's some obvious padding, it's short and to the point. Two likable guys go on an adventure, find a couple girls, and stumble on a plot. Nothing big, nothing super special, but fun. And my mom liked Bo Hopkins' character. That was the most important thing. What was funny is that my mom has been avidly watching a live stream put out by this channel on YouTube called Virtual Railfan. They have a whole bunch of live streams, and this one it focuses on a train station in Fort Madison, Iowa, which is right next to the Mississippi River. And there's a bridge that moves, it contracts and turns so that barges can pass through. This movie opened with a montage that shows a bridge that looks awfully similar, and then it shows close-ups of all these different barges, and we were like, hey, is that bridge? Is that our bridge? Is this Fort Madison? Those barges, hey, they look just like the ones in the live stream. What? We probably got a little bit too excited, but it's the little things in life. And the timing was kind of crazy. Movie number 3 is 1984's The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. Peter Weller stars as Buckaroo Banzai, brain surgeon, physicist, rock star, and comic book hero who successfully tests out a device that makes interdimensional travel possible and gets himself and his group, the Hong Kong Cavaliers, embroiled in a battle between two warring groups of extraterrestrials. This is a cult favorite and a movie my mom has seen many, many times. It's nutty, but if you're game, it's highly enjoyable. The cast is pretty nigh impeccable, with John Lithgow, Jeff Goldblum, Ellen Barkin, Christopher Lloyd, to name a few. It's a wacky plot and a wacky movie with fun makeup and prosthetics and quirky costumes, some that make sense, some that don't. Admittedly, the scientific babble is so steep at times that I'm not sure what they're talking about is even remotely plausible, but the movie's hilarious. Highlights include all the aliens being named John, but with different last names, the most ridiculous one being John Big Boutte, Lithgow's outrageous performance as Dr. Lizardo, the cliched lines that sound profound but aren't, the protective goggles made of bubble wrap, Goldblum's reaction when he first sees the alien's true form, and something I noticed this time, the presidential instructions for declaring war include a short version in case of emergency inside an envelope with instructions printed on the outside in such large font that the word has to be broken up into 3 lines. It's a funny movie, but you also have to understand that a lot of the humor is derived from how absurd everything is. It's probably not for everybody, but if you don't take it too seriously, you can have a good time. The end of the movie teases a sequel, Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League, but alas, they weren't able to make it. There have been attempts over the years, and supposedly there's an effort right now to make it happen. But according to my mom, for whom Peter Weller is the #1 draw, and this is her favorite movie of his, the window for a sequel that would be of peak interest to her has closed. Movie number 4 is 1959's Rio Bravo, a western in which a man is arrested for murder in a tiny Texas town. His brother sends his gang plus some hired guns to break him out of jail, but they'll have to get past Sheriff John Wayne and his motley crew of deputies first. I'd only watched part of this before, so I wanted to amend that and see the whole thing. The story goes that producer-director Howard Hawks was disgusted by the films High Noon and 3:10 to Yuma, where local law enforcement is bullied, cowed, and terrorized by slick outlaws, so he set out to make a simple but fun picture where the law faces the bully and says, "Bring it on." There's something vivacious about this movie. Walter Brennan's Stumpy is a firecracker, TV star and teen idol Ricky Nelson is a cool, fresh face, and Angie Dickinson's got an extra spicy dynamic with John Wayne. Ironically, the sober side of the story comes from Dean Martin's alcoholic deputy going through the physical and emotional anguish of withdrawal. He gives probably the best performance in the film, so compelling you might forget he's primarily a singer, not an actor. Of course, you couldn't have both Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson in a movie without having them sing, and that lighthearted sequence is one of the highlights of the film. The movie is kind of long, and I did have a few slow blinks in the middle. Not necessarily the movie's fault, it just happens. But the last hour or so really perks up, and the solid shootout finale is made even better by the quick, witty interactions between the teammates. It also features Ward Bond and Claude Akins, and Dimitri Tompkins' music score, which is like its own character. Movie number 5 is 2013's Phantom, a Cold War story inspired by the disappearance of a Russian diesel sub in 1968. Ed Harris plays a captain ready for retirement who's dealing with demons from his past and a psychological ailment who is tasked by the Soviet Navy with taking his old sub for a final run before it's sold to China. But when a couple sketchy technicians come aboard to test some new device on the way, he suspects there's something bigger afoot. The film also stars David Duchovny and William Fichtner. Fichtner plays Harris's second-in-command, and he's a really likable character, the solid, stand-up type you want to have your back. There are moments of tension and action, a couple sequences that feel like they come from a horror movie, and there's also compelling drama. My criticism is that it feels like there are some bits missing, links that would have better connected elements within the story. But besides that, and some cheap-looking underwater explosion effects, it's a decent film. Movie number 6 is a TV movie from 1962 titled This Is Not a Test. It's got a good premise. A policeman is conducting a late-night roadblock in the mountains when an alert comes over the radio warning that the country is under attack and everyone needs to find shelter. The policeman and the occupants of the vehicles he's stopped must figure out what to do before the estimated time to impact runs out. It sounds intense and like something I'd enjoy, a study of psychological changes and psychological breakdown in a small, isolated group of strangers, forced to be together, people freaking out, alliances breaking down, new relationships forming, new leaders emerging, friction growing between people. But it wasn't really a good movie. It had promising moments, promising elements, but I think it would have fared better in more experienced hands. The actors don't make much of an impression, and a couple of them are pretty bad. The policeman in particular was as dull as dishwater and as emotive as a plank of wood. He also bore an uncanny resemblance to handsome Squidward, and once I got that thought in my mind, I couldn't let go of it. The dialogue and the editing were disjointed as well, though some of that may have been caused by the writers struggling to get certain elements past the censors. Things do ramp up in the finale. It gets a little crazy and ironic, but the ending didn't redeem the rest of the film for me. It took too long for people to stop acting like aliens pretending to be humans. Speaking of aliens acting like humans, movie number 7 is a viewer recommendation from 1983 called Strange Invaders. You can find this on YouTube, and the quality is iffy. It's low resolution, so the faces are kind of blurry, and there are Portuguese or Brazilian subtitles stuck on it. As for the movie itself, it's got an awfully corny beginning set in the 50s with a certain hokiness that makes it feel like a parody. But if you can get past all that, it's actually a good movie. It's about a professor, played by Paul Lamont, who goes looking for his ex-wife in a small town where the few inhabitants act bizarre and become hostile. He barely makes it out and goes on a quest for answers, trying to get anyone who will listen to help him. But aliens masquerading as humans are waiting at every turn to shut him up. It does continue to have some hokey moments, but it's clear it was made by people who love 50s sci-fi movies, and if you love 50s sci-fi movies, as I do, you can appreciate that. The music by John Addison sounds at times like a tribute to old Alien movie scores. You've even got Kenneth Tobey making a sinister appearance, and The Day the Earth Stood Still plays on the TV in one scene. The story's engaging, characters are pretty good, there are some familiar faces in minor roles. What most impressed me, though, were the makeup effects and prosthetics. There's some freaky stuff here, and it was all the better for being so unexpected in what initially felt like a TV movie geared toward adolescents. There are some very neat sequences, and I'm not gonna give it away by saying any more. It's a good movie, provided you can hang on through the bumpy parts. Movie number 8 is 2015's Forsaken, a western that stars Kiefer Sutherland and his father, Donald Sutherland. Supposedly, Kiefer asked writer Brad Merman to come up with a suitable script so they could make a movie together before they lost the opportunity. Kiefer Sutherland plays a Civil War vet turned gunman who hangs up his weapons and returns home to a stony reception from his father, a recently widowed preacher who resents him for being away so long, and the rest of the altered community, which is involved in a bitter land conflict. What unfolds is a familiar story if you've seen your fair share of westerns. I don't want to say that it's predictable because that's more negative than I'm inclined to be with this movie, but let's put it this way, you don't watch it for the plot twists. The scenes involving a gang of ruthless hired guns are particularly unpleasant, but it's one of those things where the worse they behave, the more satisfying it will be when they get their comeuppance. There are supporting performances from Demi Moore and Brian Cox. He drops a lot of F-bombs, which felt incongruous given the rest of the dialogue, but his coarse language sets him apart from everyone else and tells you how much he doesn't care about respecting others or wasting time on niceties. It's a good film, directed by John Cassar, who worked with Kiefer Sutherland on the first 7 seasons of 24. It's not particularly original, but it's a meaningful story with stirring performances from the leads. Seeing the Sutherlands act together is the movie's biggest draw, and their most emotional scenes are powerful, not just because of what's going on thematically, but because of the actors' real-life relationship. It's especially interesting to see how Kiefer, who's middle-aged himself, uses changes in posture and body language to show the character's humility and deference around his father. He's a guy with a reputation for killing, yet around his dad, he's vulnerable, like an admonished boy. It helps that Donald is a man of imposing stature, which is used here to narrative advantage. I don't know why they didn't make a movie together sooner. Unsurprisingly, they have good father-son chemistry. Movie number 9 is 1959's Terror in the Midnight Sun, a rare Swedish horror film you can find on YouTube, in which a meteor crashes in the Lapland region, above the Arctic Circle, and a team goes up to check it out, discovering it wasn't just a meteor, and a huge creature is now roaming the mountains. This one has a dismal IMDb rating of 3.8, but it's not such a bad movie. It's got some good atmosphere, and the creature, although it's comically simple, is well shot from angles that give you the impression it is 20 meters tall as advertised. But the movie does have some problems. First, the title for the English version, Terror in the Midnight Sun, sounds spooky, but it's wrong. The Midnight Sun phenomena occurs during summer. My mom's been watching it on her Norway and Finland live streams, but the film is quite obviously set in summer, so right away, your title is dumb. A more substantial issue, though, is that there's a lot of time given to developing the relationship between the Swedish geologist and womanizer and his associate's niece, a sassy American athlete. I wasn't really into this romance, and I certainly didn't need to spend so much time on it. There are also extensive sequences of characters skiing and ice skating, and if you take all that out, there's not much left of your monster movie, and by the time it did get around to really showing us stuff, I had kind of lost interest. Movie number 10 was another rewatch. To make a long story short, this title came up in conversation, and I knew that we'd seen it because my list said so, and I was pretty sure that I liked it, but I couldn't remember it, so a rewatch was in order. 1944's Ministry of Fear, directed by Fritz Lang, stars Ray Milland as a man who has just been released from a mental asylum only to accidentally get tangled up with a spy ring. When he goes looking for answers, he ends up in even deeper trouble, all against the backdrop of the London Blitz. This is a solid film, tinged with a feeling of paranoia. Milan's hero is an appealing guy, despite a troubling secret, and he's easy to root for. He's joined by a parade of recognizable faces, though the only person I could name without looking them up was Dan Duryea, and it's entirely possible that the movie I recognize some of these faces from is this one. It's a well-made, quick-paced, exciting thriller which boasts some memorable moments and a few noteworthy shots that stuck out to me. There's a cool scene that plays out in front of a huge mirror that creates a bit of an illusion, and there's a climactic moment involving darkness, a door, and a bullet hole providing the only source of light. Very eerie. Movie number 11 is 1962's Mr. Arkadin, also known as Confidential Report, a thriller in which a guy and his girlfriend get a tip from a dying man to seek out the rich and powerful Gregory Arkadin to make their fortunes. But in making contact with this mysterious man, they end up getting more than they bargained for. Orson Welles, who stars as the titular character, also wrote and directed the film, and you can tell, from the international flavor to the whimsical sense of humor, the Dutch angles, the Greg Toland-inspired photography, the great enigmatic man surrounded by pretty women, the quirky side characters, the circusy music, the dizzy editing and overlapping dialogue, the weird, dreamlike visuals and convoluted storyline. This has Orson Welles written all over it. It's kind of crazy and all over the place, but it's entertaining, so it's worth the additional effort required to keep up. The character of Mr. Arkadin is somewhat neutral and not without humor, yet he's filmed in a sinister way, the camera angled so that his figure looms and his scene partner has to look up as if he's 8 feet tall. Welles also delivers a lot of his dialogue while glaring straight into the camera lens. The film has a vibrant group of co-stars, Robert Arden and Paula Mori, Patricia Medina and Akeem Tamirov. Welles also sneaks in a number of recognizable faces in brief but unique parts, like Michael Redgrave as an eccentric curiosity shop owner who drives a hard bargain, and Misha Auer as a man running a flea circus. It did take me a while to get into the film, but ultimately it was a diverting experience, another reminder that there's nothing quite like an Orson Welles picture. Movie number 12 is 2004's Incident at Loch Ness, a mockumentary about the making of a documentary about director Werner Herzog, who is himself making a documentary about the Loch Ness Monster. Neither film turns out as planned, as tensions break out, an individual tries to take over the production, and the camera crew ventures out on an ill-fated boat trip. If the monster angle is what sounds most appealing, I have to say that it does take a while to get to it, but it does get there. However, this is more a meta, tongue-in-cheek look at filmmaking and its pitfalls and the headaches that even a seasoned director may have to deal with. Werner Herzog plays himself. You don't have to have seen any of his films to appreciate this one, but it does help if you at least know about him. Herzog was heavily involved in the making of this movie, which was co-written and directed by Zach Penn, who co-stars as himself, playing the producer and humorously emerging as the antagonist. It takes guts to write such outrageous dialogue for your character, knowing you're going to be playing yourself under your own name. My mom pretty much hated his character, so then she wanted to know if he was this much of a jerk in real life, and that made it even funnier. Most of the cast members are, in fact, playing themselves, and the final result is rather ingenious and quite entertaining. And those are all the movies I saw in June. I hope you enjoyed this video. As usual, you can find a list of the movies in the description, and I hope you'll let me know what you thought of any of the movies that you may have seen in the comments below, and I'll be back soon with another review. Thanks for watching.